Diamond Prajna-paramita, Part 2. At the time, Subhuti asked the Buddha, "World-honored one, if a virtuous man or woman is determined to develop the supreme enlightened mind, how should his or her mind abide, and how should it be subdued?" The Buddha said to Subhuti, "A virtuous man or woman who is determined to develop the supreme enlightened mind should thus develop it. I have to lead all living beings to put a stop to reincarnation and escape suffering. And when they have been so led, not one of them in fact stops reincarnating or escapes suffering. Why? Because, Subhuti, if a bodhisattva clings to the notion of an ego, a personality, a being, and a life, he is not a true bodhisattva. Why? Because, Subhuti, there is not really a dharma which can develop the supreme enlightenment mind." Subhuti, what do you think? When the Tathagata was with Dipamkara Buddha, did he have any dharma by means of which he attained supreme enlightenment or Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi? No, world-honored one. As I understand the meaning of the Buddha's teaching, when he was with Dipamkara Buddha, he had no dharma by means of which he attained supreme enlightenment. The Buddha said, "Just so, Subhuti, just so. There was really no dharma by means of which the Tathagata attained supreme enlightenment. Subhuti, if there had been, Dipamkara Buddha would not have predicted, 'In your next life you will be a Buddha named Sakyamuni.' Why is it? Because Tathagata means the suchness of all dharmas. If someone still says the Tathagata obtained supreme enlightenment, I tell you, Subhuti, there is no dharma by means of which the Buddha did so, because, Subhuti, that enlightenment was by itself neither real nor unreal. This is why the Tathagata says that all dharmas are Buddha's dharmas. Subhuti, these so-called dharmas are not, but are expediently called all dharmas." Subhuti, suppose there is a man whose body is great. Subhuti said, "World-honored one, the great body of which the Tathagata speaks is not great, but is expediently called a great body." Subhuti, in like manner, if a bodhisattva says, "I should lead uncountable living beings to put a stop to reincarnation and escape from suffering," he cannot be called a bodhisattva. Why? Because there really is no dharma called the bodhisattva stage. Therefore, the Buddha says, "Of all dharmas, there is not a single one which possesses an ego, a personality, a being, and a life." Subhuti, if a bodhisattva says, "I should adorn Buddha lands," he cannot be called a bodhisattva. Why? Because when the Tathagata speaks of such adornment, it is not, but is expediently called adornment. Subhuti, if a bodhisattva is thoroughly versed in the doctrine of the unreality of ego and of things, or dharma, the Tathagata will call him a true bodhisattva. Subhuti, what do you think? Does the Tathagata possess human eyes? Yes, world-honored one, the Tathagata possesses human eyes. Subhuti, what do you think? Does the Tathagata possess Deva eyes? Yes, world-honored one, the Tathagata possesses Deva eyes. Subhuti, what do you think? Does the Tathagata possess wisdom eyes? Yes, world-honored one, the Tathagata possesses wisdom eyes. Subhuti, what do you think? Does the Tathagata possess Dharma eyes? Yes, world-honored one, the Tathagata possesses Dharma eyes. Subhuti, what do you think? Does the Tathagata possess Buddha eyes? Yes, world-honored one, the Tathagata possesses Buddha eyes. Subhuti, what do you think? Does the Tathagata say that the sand grains in the Ganges are sand grains? Yes, world-honored one, the Tathagata says they are sand grains. Subhuti, what do you think? If there were as many Ganges rivers as sand grains in the Ganges, and if there were as many Buddha realms as sand grains of all these Ganges rivers, would there be many world systems? Many, world-honored one. The Buddha said, the living beings in all these world systems have many different minds, which are all known to the Tathagata. Why? Because the minds the Tathagata speaks of are not minds, but are expediently called minds. And why? Because, Subhuti, neither the past, the present, nor the future mind can be found. Subhuti, what do you think? If someone filled the universe with the 7 treasures and gave all away in his practice of dana, would this good cause enable the giver to gain a great merit? Yes, world-honored one. Because of this good cause, the giver would gain a great merit. Subhuti, if the merit was real, the Tathagata would not say it was great. He says so because there is no merit. Subhuti, what do you think? Can the Buddha be perceived by his completely perfect physical body, or Rupakaya? No, world-honored one, the Tathagata should not be so perceived. Why? Because the Buddha says that the completely perfect Rupakaya is not, but is called the completely perfect Rupakaya. Subhuti, what do you think? Can the Tathagata be perceived by his completely perfect forms? No, world-honored one, the Tathagata should not be so perceived, because the Tathagata says the completely perfect forms are not, but are called completely perfect forms. Subhuti, do not say that the Tathagata thinks, I must expound the Dharma. Do not have such a thought. Why? Because if someone says so, he will really slander the Buddha and be unable to understand my teaching. Subhuti, when the Tathagata expounds the Dharma, there is really no Dharma to teach. But this is expediently called teaching the Dharma. Then the wise Subhuti said to the Buddha, World-honored one, will there be in future ages living beings who will believe this Dharma when they hear it? The Buddha said, Subhuti, the living beings you just mentioned are neither living nor not living beings. Why? Because, Subhuti, the Tathagata says these living beings are not really, but they are expediently called living beings. Subhuti said to the Buddha, World-honored one, does your own attainment of supreme enlightenment or Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi mean that you have not gained anything whatsoever? The Buddha replied, Just so, Subhuti, just so. I have not gained even the least Dharma from supreme enlightenment, and this is called supreme enlightenment. Furthermore, Subhuti, this Dharma is universal and impartial. Wherefore, it is called supreme enlightenment. The practice of all good virtues, or dharmas, free from attachment to an ego, a personality, a being, and a life, will result in the attainment of supreme enlightenment. Subhuti, the so-called virtues, or dharmas, the Tathagata says, are not good, but are expediently called good virtues. Subhuti, if, on the one hand, a man, in his practice of charity or dana, gives away the 7 treasures piled up in a heap as great as all of the mounts Sumeru in the universe put together, and on the other hand, another man receives, holds in mind, reads, and recites even a 4-line stanza of this Prajna-paramita Sutra and expounds it to others, the merit resulting from the former's dana will not be worth 100th, 1,000, 1/10,000th, 100,000th part of that obtained by the latter, as no conceivable comparison can be made between the two. Subhuti, what do you think? You should not say that Tathagata has this thought in his mind, quote, I should liberate living beings. Subhuti, You should not think so. Why? Because there are really no living beings whom the Tathagata can liberate. If there were, the Tathagata would hold the concept of an ego, a personality, a being, and a life. Subhuti, when the Tathagata speaks of an ego, there is in reality no ego, although common men think so. Subhuti, the Tathagata says common men are not, but are expediently called common men. Subhuti, what do you think? Can the Tathagata be recognized by his 32 physical characteristics? Subhuti replied, Yes, he can. The Buddha said, Subhuti, if the Tathagata can be recognized by his 32 physical characteristics, a world ruler or Chakravarti would be the Tathagata. Subhuti said to the Buddha, World-honored one, as I understand your teaching, the Tathagata cannot be recognized by his 32 physical characteristics. Thereupon, the world-honored one recited the following Getha. He who sees me by outward appearance and seeks me in sound treads the heterodox path and cannot perceive the Tathagata. Subhuti, if you have in your mind this thought, quote, the Tathagata does not rely on his possession of characteristics to obtain supreme enlightenment, close quote. Subhuti, banish that thought. Subhuti, if you think it while developing the perfect enlightenment mind, you will advocate the annihilation of all dharmas. Do not have such a thought. Why? Because one who develops the supreme enlightenment mind does not advocate the annihilation of things. Subhuti, if, on the one hand, a bodhisattva gave in his practice of dana all the 7 treasures in quantity sufficient to fill worlds as many as sand grains in the Ganges, and on the other hand, another man comprehended that all dharmas were egoless and thereby achieved perfection of patience or kshanti, the latter's merit would surpass that of the former. Why? Because, Subhuti, all bodhisattvas do not receive reward for their merits. Subhuti asked the Buddha, World-honored one, why do bodhisattvas not receive reward for their merits? Subhuti, bodhisattvas should have no longing and no attachment when they practice meritorious virtues. Therefore, they do not receive a reward. Subhuti, if someone says the Tathagata comes or goes, sits or lies, he does not understand what I mean. Why? Because the Tathagata has neither whence to come nor whither to go. Therefore, he is called the Tathagata. Subhuti, what do you think? If a virtuous man or woman reduced to dust all the worlds in the universe, would those particles of dust be many? Subhuti replied, Many, world-honored one. Why? Because if they really existed, the Buddha would not say they were particles of dust. And why? Because when the Buddha speaks of particles of dust, they are not, but are expediently called particles of dust. World-honored one, when the Tathagata speaks of worlds, they are not, but are expediently called worlds. Why? Because if they really exist, they are just agglomerations. The Tathagata speaks of agglomerations which are not, but are expediently called agglomerations. Subhuti, that which is called an agglomeration cannot be spoken of, but the vulgar man has longing for and attachment to this thing. Subhuti, what do you think? If someone says, the Buddha speaks of the view of an ego, a personality, a being, and a life. Subhuti, does that person understand what I mean? No, world-honored one, that person does not understand. Why? Because when the Tathagata speaks of the view of an ego, a personality, a being, and a life, it is not really, but is expediently called the view of an ego, a personality, a being and a life. Subhuti, he who develops the supreme enlightenment mind should thus know, see, believe, and comprehend all things. He should not set up the perception of things in his mind. Subhuti, the so-called form of things, the Tathagata says is not, but is expediently called, the form of things. Subhuti, if on the one hand someone gave away in alms the 7 treasures in quantities sufficient to fill all the worlds in uncountable eons, and if on the other hand a virtuous man or woman developed the Bodhi mind and received, held in mind, read, and recited even a 4-line stanza of this sutra and expounded it to others, the latter's merit would surpass that of the former. In what manner should it be taught to others? By teaching it without attachment to form, with the immutability of the Absolute. Why is this? Because all phenomena are like a dream, an illusion, a bubble and a shadow, like dew and lightning. Thus should you meditate upon them. When the Buddha had finished expounding this sutra, the elder Subhuti, together with bhikshus, bhikshunis, upasakas, upasikas, and all the worlds of devas, men, and asuras who had listened to his teaching, were filled with joy and believed, received, and observed it.